Hey everyone, and welcome back to the shop. This is the project that we're going to work on today. It's a small outdoor end table. The apron has a bead molding detail at the bottom. The legs are tapered, and it's made out of Sepele. Let's go ahead and get started by making the legs. I'm making the legs out of 8/4 Sepele, and the first thing I'll do is cut the board a little heavy at 16.5. Now I've got the legs squared up at 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. I'll put a square edge on the end of each leg. And I'll hang the square end off the table. That reminds me that this is the end that will go against the stop block. I've set the stop block up at 16.25 inches, holding the square end of the leg against the stop block. I'll make the cut on all 4 legs. I'm going to taper the legs using this Rockler tapering jig, which works pretty good. And what I like to do when I'm tapering a leg is do a quick inspection of the wood that you're using. If there's any defects, try to cut them away. This leg happens to have a check right here, so I'm going to hang that off of the jig and it will be cut away. I've set the jig up so the bottom of the leg is at 1 inch and the top of the leg will be at 1 3/4 square. After completing the first cut, I'll loosen up the jig, rotate the leg 1/4 turn, make sure it hits the stop, put the clamp back, and tighten it up. Make sure that your clamp doesn't extend beyond where you're cutting. You don't want to hit the clamp with the blade. For the table apron, I'm using 1x6 Sepele. 1x6 measures 3/4 by 5.5, and I need 4 pieces at 8 3/4. So I'm going to rough cut this board at 37. This one board will give me all 4 parts for the table apron. And I'm using a bead molding router bit to put a little detail at the bottom of the apron. And it's a good idea to take a minute, inspect the board, and make sure that you put that detail on the best side of the board. Because most of my boards have a slight defect on one edge or the other, I'll put the bead molding on the good edge and then rip the boards at 5 inches, removing the defect. Clamping the boards together like this will give me a wider surface and make it easier to use the router and keep it steady. I squared up the one end, set up a stop block, and now I'll cut the 4 parts at 8 3/4. On the back of the apron, on 2 of the sides, I'll measure over 1 1/8 These marks will be for aligning the Craig jig. And then the two opposite sides, again on the back, I'll measure over 1 3/8 inches. And this way, when the table is assembled, the screws won't hit each other inside the leg. I'm attaching the apron to the legs with 1¼ inch exterior pocket hole screws. The blue screws are for exterior use. Make sure that the square sides of your leg are facing the inside, the tapers are facing the out, and I've got a piece of 1/2 inch scrap wood here that I'm using as a guide. If my scrap wood is flush with the back of the leg, then the apron is clamped in the correct position and I'm ready to attach it with the pocket hole screw. Now I have 2 sides of the table assembled, and I thought I'd just point out that I like to put pencil lines on the square sides of the leg. It just reminds me to attach the apron to the square side. Another thing to think about is make sure that the bead is down at the bottom and facing out. It's easy to make these mistakes where you attach the boards in the wrong position. Everybody does it, everybody makes mistakes. So now I'm going to assemble the table by attaching the apron to one side first. These holes are drilled 1/4 inch in on each side. That's to prevent the screws from hitting inside the leg. I'll go ahead and attach the apron to this side first, like this. And then we'll go ahead and put this one right on top. I'll make sure that I'm flush at the top so the apron is flush with the top of the leg. And again, I'm going to use this spacer to make sure the apron is in the correct position. To drive the screws in the tight space inside the table, I needed to switch to a shorter driver. I just gave the base a quick sanding, and before I get started on the top, I'm going to apply 1 coat of the Danish teak oil on the top because I won't be able to get to it once I attach the top. And I want to seal the end grain of the legs and the top of the apron. So I'll go ahead, apply 1 coat of the finish, put it out in the sun, and by the time I finish lunch and get started on the top, this will be dry enough to continue to work on. I'm making the top of the table with 3 boards, 2 1x6s and a 1x4 in the center. I've set up a stop block and I'll cut the boards at 14 3/4. For an added design element, I'll set the table saw at a 45-degree angle and cut a slight chamfer at the bottom of the top. To cut the 45-degree angle on the end grain, I'll use the miter gauge and a mag switch for the stop. The 3 boards that make up the top will be screwed directly into the apron. I've measured and marked to make sure I'm hitting the center of the apron, and next I'll pre-drill and countersink holes for the screws. With the center board clamped in position, I'll first drill a pilot hole. That should prevent the wood from splitting, and then attach the board with 4 1/4 inch exterior screws. using a little wood glue, I'll tap the plugs in place and make sure that the grain is going in the same direction as the board. If you're wondering about the finish on these tables, it's Danish teak oil. 2 coats, allowing each coat to dry for about 15 minutes and then allowing maybe 2 or 3 hours in between coats. And the nice thing about that is you can freshen up these tables every year by just applying a coat. I don't have a ton of experience with the finish, but these are exterior tables, so I'm not that concerned. If you want to change that up, obviously you could build these for interior use and change the finish. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.